Good evening. This is Leo Meyer bringing you a new edition of Backstage Buzz. And tonight we have with us a very special lady who will surprise, amuse, and stagger us with wonder about her path, career, and her personal life. Ladies and gentlemen of the listening audience, I'm going to introduce to you Miss Deborah Voigt, the famous dramatic soprano from the Metropolitan Opera. Debbie, you're on.
Well, thank you, Leo. That was quite an introduction. I hope I can live up to it.
Oh, it won't be any trouble, Mike, dear. You are a very special lady and an unusually dazzling talent. I must tell our audience that you have appeared all over the world in the most rigorous repertoire that I think any dramatic soprano has ever undertaken. You've done it all the operas of Wagner and all those roles of Brunhilde, Sieglinde, Tristan and Isolde, plus the works of Verdi. And you've done crossover work. You've done musical comedy. You've done it all. And now you're also a glamorous television star, the mediator for the Metropolitan Opera HD series that go to the movie theaters. That's a whole new dimension. And you've had a fascinating career.
I've been very, very fortunate. I've worked very hard, but I was really blessed to be given a gift, and I've kind of just picked it up and run with it for the last 30 years. And yes, I'm excited about the opportunity to do different things. I think I've sung most of the repertoire that I would want to, but with maybe one exception. I still would like to sing Electra, Strausss Electra, but I don't know,
How did you miss that this far?
Well, it's come up a couple of times and just, fell apart for reasons having nothing to do with me. So, at some point you have to look at the handwriting on the wall and say, well, maybe I'm not supposed to get to that one. But I did have sort of a goal, which was that I wanted to be the only woman to ever sing all three of the ladies in the Electra, Strauss's Electra, obviously not at the same time. But I began by singing Chrysothemis and had hoped to do Electra and Clytemnestra. Leonie Riesnick sang all three roles, but she didn't actually sing Electra on stage. There was a film made of her Electra performance, which we're very lucky to have had.
Well, let me ask you something. What inspired you to attempt and get into such heavy repertoire?
Well, I had a voice that grew into that repertoire. I didn't, of course, come out of school singing that repertoire, but eventually that's where my voice led me. And I think it was a very cautious path on the way to Strauss and Wagner. I initially began singing a little bit of Mozart, but really only for about 10 minutes in my career. And then I started taking on the lighter Verdi roles. And one by one, I checked them off the list, and some Puccini, and then some lighter Wagner. I think the first Wagner I sang was maybe Elsa or Elizabeth. I'm not sure which one came first, but they're both sort of the same stepstones along the Wagnerian repertoire for sopranos. And then along came Isolde, and eventually Deborah.
But this is a repertoire of self-torture, this wonderfully heavy repertoire that you do, but yet you approach the Wagner as something so airy and light and colorful. To hear you sing this repertoire is astounding, because you sing it unlike any other singer.
Well, I think material. That Wagner, in some sense, gets a bad rap, because
it's true.
Yes, his orchestras are enormous, and yes, they can make an enormous amount of sound, but that's not the bulk of Wagner's repertoire. And so when I, especially with Brunhilde, began to explore how to sing her well, I tried to look for the softer dynamics and softer colors so that there would be a differentiation between those dynamic levels, but also to find the softness in the character as well.
Right.
That Brunhilde, yes, she goes through a very trying period of being extremely angry by what has happened with Siegfried. But at the same time, she begins her journey, the first time that we see her, as a tomboy. And that's a different color. That's a different vocal energy. And then she goes through Siegfried, and of course being abandoned by her father, first of all, on that fire-rimmed mountain, and then meeting Siegfried and the whole love duet that goes on between the two of them, and finding a femininity in that portrayal that you don't necessarily see in Brunhilde die Valkyrie.
Well, you have a Stanislavski approach to the subtext of this wonderful characters.
Well, she's so rich. I mean, there's just so much there to draw on, and that's part of why I'm so very lucky to sing the repertoire that I do, because the ladies that I sing are so complex, and there's so much to sort of chew on in a meal of Tristan and Isolde.
Have you ever translated this kind of purge into a straight acting role?
I would love to do that. And, the truth of the matter is that being an opera singer is so all-consuming, especially if you're fortunate enough to have a very public career and a career that did present a lot of different repertoire. And so the real constraints of that mean that you don't have time to explore other things, whether that be musical or comedy, just a straight play, even so much as doing recitals of certain repertoire that might be interesting that you just simply don't have the time. I think probably 10 years ago or so, I sat down with some gentlemen from the William Morris Agency, because I am an American singer and wanted to be able to sing repertoire that I grew up singing, repertoire that's part of my culture. And they looked at my schedule and they said, well, you don't have any free time for the next 3 years. And that was the truth of it, that there just simply wasn't time. And now I'm at a point where I'm picking and choosing a little bit more carefully. And as I said, I've sung most of the repertoire that I would, and there comes a time in a career where you have to say, okay, well, would I sing Isolde as well today as I did 10 years ago, I believe is when I sang the role for the first time, and I'm not sure that I would, and I'm not sure I want to put myself through trying to replicate myself, if that makes any sense.
You have to edit your own work, which is...
A little bit, yes.
Yes. Well, you of course... have undergone a great transformation in your life and your work with the whole series of events that followed the incident in London with Ariadne of Naxos, when they determined at that time you were so heavy that they didn't want you to appear in the costume that they chose.
Yes, I've come to refer to it as the little black dress moment.
The little black dress.
In my life, because that was the problem, was that Ariadne was to, in this production, wear a little black dress. And I would have worn a big black tarp at that point in my life. And while I was probably one of the preeminent Ariadnes at that time, they decided that I just was not going to work in this production.
Well, was that the result of, was that Papano's decision? Or?
Well, he, was the music director of the house, and so, to some extent, yes, it was his responsibility in that he should have had the power to override any sort of administrative decisions that were being made, and for whatever reasons, I'm assuming because he agreed, he did not decide that music was going to be first and foremost, that, the production values were really going to be first and foremost.
He's a local boy here from Bridgeport.
Well, I'm so sorry, Bridgeport, if I'm offending you. But, history is history.
But that event had a great effect on you personally, obviously, because it sort of was a lightning bolt, I imagine, to the realization that you would take matters into your own hands and do something about it. It
really wasn't. I mean, I had certainly been told that I was too heavy for productions prior to that. That it wasn't that suddenly I went, what? They think I'm too fat? I knew that this was a problem, and I had been dealing with it in ways that I, didn't have terrible success with for many years. Tried every diet known to man. and for whatever reason, just was not able to get off significant enough weight in a relatively short time that I felt like I could handle it. You know, when you're looking at needing to take off 100, 120, 130 pounds, that's a very big mountain to climb in terms of staying focused and actually being able to do it. So I think that, you know, people obviously look at the trajectory of my career and say, oh, well, that happened, and so she decided to take matters in her hands again and have gastric bypass. But I had actually already consulted with a doctor and was thinking about it. And the truth was that I didn't have time for it, for the recovery from the procedure and to begin the process of dropping weight. And lo and behold, Royal Opera House released me from that contract, and so I suddenly had time. And because it was a legally binding contract, yes, opera and every other musical art form is a business in one way or another, Covent Garden had to buy out the contract. So you could look at it that they gave me the time and the money to have the procedure, but the impetus to do so did not originate with them.
Uh-huh. Well, let me ask you something. How, in approaching work after this all happened, and you emerged as a size 8 or a size 10, and with a gorgeous figure and looking
more like a 12 or 14, but thank you.
Becoming a glamour girl overnight, and has been a wonderful and exciting experience. How has that influenced the approach on your music and your work and your singing?
Well, I think it relieved me of one major problem, several, but in particular, I knew that in some people's minds, I was not viable as an attractive woman. That there were people in the audience that saw me at the weight that I was and thought there's no way that good-looking tenor, and they weren't all good-looking tenors, but sometimes they were, there's no way that he would love that woman at that size, which is, very sad. I had a very loving relationship. I had, many relationships, and size was not an issue. But size was an issue in my mind, and I felt uncomfortable all the time. And when I did my first Chrysotomus at the Met, it was just not long off after the advent of the Met titles. And one of the things that Electra says to Chrysotomus during their conversation is that Chrysotomus is so thin that she could fit through the cracks in the palace walls. And of course, I'm, 320 pounds. And I knew that this was going to cause, titters of laughter through the theater. And I was very concerned about it. And I talked to someone from administration, and the Met very graciously changed the title, as they do, in other moments where something that's literally translated from one language to English might come across as being rather comical at a moment when we don't want to be funny. So I was able to go out on stage for the first time in my career and know that element of judgment, maybe from an audience and from myself, upon myself, was relieved.
Right.
It just took it out of the equation, it just made it easier. And also I think, too, that, I always got a bad rap for not being a good actress. And when I look back at it now, I'm not sure that it was that I wasn't a good actress so much as it was people couldn't see it. When you're walking around with that much extra weight, it's harder to read your face.
Right.
It's harder to use your body in such a way that it influences the emotion of what you're saying. People can't see that when you're such a large woman and subsequently being costumed in such a way.
Interesting. Well, now tell us about your new activities as hostess for the HD series. How did that come about?
Well, that was, let's see now, this is the 10th season, I believe. The Met's just wrapping up, and yeah, it was the baby of Peter Gelb. He came to the Met and decided to do this. And when it first began, we all of us we singers were thinking, well, how is this going to play out? there's going to be cameras on us the whole time, and they're going to follow us back to our dressing room, and we're going to have to talk to them. And what is happening?
But you're
I remember walking
good at it, and it comes as a natural thing for you.
Well, I enjoy it now. I mean, the first hosting that I did. Now, this was early days, and we would have maybe one camera, and there were no teleprompters, and so we would have, cards in our hands that we would have to look at for the next question and still look like we're engaged with the singer that we're speaking to. So it took some time for the Met and Mr. Gelb to work out the kinks in this amazing thing that has now become so very popular with opera lovers.
Well, it's a great thing, and I can imagine it's been a shot in the arm for the Metropolitan Opera. I should certainly think it's hypoed the box office. I don't know what the statistics would show on that, but everyone who sees the broadcast in the movie theaters is stunned at how wonderfully effective the whole program is.
Well, it certainly brings opera to a public that maybe not have had access to these sorts of performances, not just the Met. Not everyone is so fortunate to be able to go to the Met.
And it's like you're sitting in the prompter's box.
Well, it is a completely different experience, and that's wonderful. But I always say, and we always say in the broadcast, that opera in its origins is meant to be seen in a theater and heard by a natural acoustic. That is the wonder of being an opera singer, is that you go out on stage and use your body and your voice to project over an enormous orchestra and influence people in a way that lets them think that what they're experiencing is as intimate as seeing it on a screen. That being said, having the opportunity to see us up close and personal, I think only makes the audience that much more aware of the complexity of what we do.
But I think audiences love it even more.
That's true. They do, indeed. And I have had a wonderful time being the host. It's great to be singing for them, of course, and there's no question, but that being seen around the world in these movie cinemas up the ante when you go to sing in countries that you don't necessarily have a lot of experience in. I went to do a recital at Mexico City, and I had never really sung there at all, and when I walked out on stage, it was like I was returning, having had some great success somewhere. And it was the first time I realized that it was the HDs that people were seeing, and then really feeling that they know us, not only as opera singers, but as people in a way that they would never have the opportunity to do so in the past.
Well, I remember attending a recital that you did shortly after the incident in London, in which you walked out on stage in the most gorgeous black and white gown I think I've ever seen, and of course it was the new you, and you had what I thought was a half-hour standing ovation. I hadn't even sung a note.
Well, we like that.
It was a wonderful experience, and it was a beautiful recital. And really very, very special. But as an American singer, you were basically trained here on the West Coast, and of course you seem to have had a terrific association at the San Francisco Opera.
Yes, I did my apprentice work with San Francisco. I began as a Merrillini in the Merrill program, and during that time, it was the first time that I ever found myself in the company of singers who were every bit as talented as I, and some of them much more so. And having come from a relatively small music department at Cal State Fullerton in Orange County, California, where I was one of the top 3 big fish, it was good for me to be in that sort of environment that was very competitive, and it was also the first time that I was really immersed in opera from the time we woke up in the morning to the time we went to sleep at night. And then I did what was then known as Western Opera Theater, and sadly it doesn't exist anymore, but it was that summer we did Don Giovanni. So then on the Western Opera Theater, we took Don Giovanni on the road on a Greyhound bus for 3 months across the United States.
Oh, my God.
Yes, and we weren't playing the, metropolis areas. We were in very small communities, and on the night that I wasn't singing Donna Anna, I was doing chorus, and then we had a little show called An Hour for the Opera, which was an introduction to opera for children, and I played Carmen in that production.
Oh, you really, really had paid your dues.
Oh, definitely.
Oh, wonderful.
And then after that was finished, I was invited to be an Nadler Fellow, which is the residential program of San Francisco Opera. So for 2 years, I lived in San Francisco, and I sang small roles on stage with some very, very fine ladies. I did the lady-in-waiting to Shirley Verrett's Lady Macbeth, which was just awe-inspiring. And I was a small role in Yenufa with Leonie Riesnick. And then I understudied. I think maybe during the course of that time I learned 6 or 7 roles and covered a lot of singers from Kiri Te Kanawa to, well, I'm blanking, of course, on them at the moment. But that was a very rich experience. And
well, your whole repertoire is so broad. It's extraordinary. And then not too long ago, you made the switch into doing musical comedies.
Well, I've begun to put my foot back in that water. I did a lot of that as a young person in high school, and yeah, I was invited to Glimmerglass a few years back, and Francesca Zambello said, "What will I have to do to get you to come and be the artist in residence and be a part of her inaugural season at Glimmerglass?" And I said, "Well, how about a musical?" And she said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" And we came up with Annie, Get Your Gun, which was great fun.
Oh, I bet. How did you deal with them? The belting process? That was
I didn't
easy.
belt. I just decided that this Annie was going to sing with her Deborah Voigt voice. And if I had to, the idea was that we were going to do it in the original keys, and there was going to be no transposition. So I thought, okay, it's low in places, but I'm just going to do the best I can. And then the gentleman who was playing the baritone role decided to transpose something. So in retrospect, I would have transposed it up a wee bit, but it was just so much fun to be singing such an enjoyable, lighthearted role. And I think that about that time I did Erwartung with the New York Phil, and maybe was getting ready to do my first Brunhilde. So I don't think you could get more diverse with repertoire.
Well, it seems you've done your musical comedy, and you're now a glamorous television hostess, and also you are the author of a wonderful new book that's just come out, that's very, very popular, called Call Me Debbie. How did that come about?
You mean the title or the book?
Well, both.
Well, the title came about because when I first began my career, my legal name is Debbie Joy Voigt. And I thought that Debbie Joy sounded like she was going to be coming from the Grand Ole Opry instead of the Metropolitan Opera, so I changed it to Deborah. But the irony is that no one who knows me well calls me Deborah. Everyone calls me Debbie. So that was how the title came about. The book, I have been very successful in my career and felt that I had some things to say about singing and about a career. And so years and years ago, when I had just really lost weight and had sort of kept it off for a period of time, I was approached about writing a book, and I thought, well, why not? And began that process, and during the course of really looking at my life and talking about weight addiction, it became very obvious that the timing was not right. And the reason for that was, as I write in Call Me Debbie, I was beginning to struggle with alcohol and addiction to it, and I just thought, I don't think I could even have articulated at the time, but I knew that the timing was not right for writing a book, and I put it aside, and now I realize that I couldn't have written about one type of addiction without addressing what was beginning to become a real problem in my life. And so time went by, and indeed, the alcohol became full-on alcoholism, and I had to deal with it, and I still deal with it. We say a daily reprieve, based on your spiritual position or where you are in your spirituality.
Well, speaking of your...
So it's a complicated thing, but I thought it was best to tell my story, and if I'm going to tell it in its entirety. And so
it's an interesting thing because through all of this, you have regained your self-respect and your self-esteem, and I love that one of the things in the book that just blew me away was the very first little preface about hearing a paranormal voice as a child telling you that you had to sing.
It was a very personal experience. Paranormal is one word. In my life, it was my hearing what I interpret as my God speaking to me, and it was a feeling perhaps more than an audible sound, but it was something that really resonated with me and has kept me going throughout my life. If there's one thing I learned from writing this book is that I have an enormous amount of resilience and being able to pick myself up and get on with it, because I have a responsibility. I was given a gift, and it is that I am meant to sing. That it became opera was maybe more circumstance than my longing to be an opera singer, but I'm quite sure that that's what I was put here to do.
Well, I wanted to thank you. Our time has come to an end, but I wanted to thank you so much for bringing a joy of your work and your experience to us today, and the great joy you're bringing to the world of music and to all the music lovers who will hear you and continue to hear you, and we wish you nothing but the best wishes for continued success in anything you do. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. It was lovely to talk with you.
Thank you for being with us.
Good night.